Sally Hitchiner, who's the chaplain of Brunel University, is with us to have a look through the inside pages. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good morning.
Just have a look at some of the front pages first. You got one there?
Yep, front page of the Times. Lots of the papers have this photograph, don't they, Charlie? The Duchess of Cambridge, who was at the Harry Potter studios in Hertfordshire, clearly enjoying herself. And also many of the papers, of course, picking up on what's going on in Syria as well.
Picture also on the front page of the Telegraph, alongside a follow-up story to the measles problems. Private schools, the focus now worries that middle-class children will not have had the MMR vaccine.
Max Clifford made front page of the Mirror as well, and more pictures from the Royals' visit to the Harry Potter film set too, and front page of the Sun, similar story.
Indeed, you're going to pick up, aren't you, from that story about Max Clifford from the Times?
Absolutely. I mean, we must emphasise it's only been alleged so far. He's very strongly denying it, but he's been accused of indecently assaulting a number of teenage girls dating from as far back as the 1960s. And it's just interesting how the trend seems to be going towards people who, without wanting to comment directly on Max Clifford, other cases have just been emerging so much in the last few weeks and months of people who felt that they were immune, perhaps from the system, but actually that it's all coming out eventually. And actually, the other interesting thing to think about is to what extent does the media play injustice these days, and to what extent can people be innocent until proven guilty when there is so much coverage in the press. I noticed a tweet from the head of the Boston Police Department when they finally caught their suspects, and the language was amazing. It was stuff like, justice has won, we can now rest in our beds, and there hadn't been a trial yet. And although I'm sure there was an awful lot of evidence, and I'm sure they've done their work very thoroughly, we just can't we just can't find ourselves saying these sort of things until we have had trials. Otherwise, we're just throwing.
And the laws are quite clear here in the UK about that as well, aren't they? I'm interested in the sort of culture whereby people perhaps, as you say, weren't able to say things before. They now, because perhaps of the media coverage, feeling encouraged perhaps to do so. Absolutely,
and I think there's definitely two sides to the argument, and the media just highlighting the fact that it's okay to start talking about this. I'd be very interested to know from statistics in general whether the publicity, particularly around Jimmy Savile, has enabled more people to come forward from with completely different cases, completely different things, whether it's just legitimised the experiences that people have had and made them feel confident enough to be taken seriously.
Let's have a look at the next story from The Guardian.
Is this the Bank of England you're talking about?
The Churchill notes.
Yes.
Look,
so we now have brand new £5 notes.
Unveiled yesterday, these
Absolutely.
ones.
And I'm very excited because I think Churchill is an incredible figure and will inspire us at this time of austerity. However, interestingly, he's knocking Elizabeth Fry off this position, and there've only ever been two women who have been in there, Elizabeth Fry and Florence Nightingale. And it's just interesting that we've only got the Queen as our figure on our banknotes. And what is this saying to little girls about their value in society when they can't even be on a banknote, when all these figures are all men? And I know history does sort of remember the men more than the women.
Would you like to put forward a woman who has not yet been on a banknote that should be?
Oh, well, that's an interesting one. I'm not sure I could say off the top of my head, but there are so many women who have made a massive difference. Marie Curie, for example, overseas, and other people overseas who've made a massive difference there. And we must be able to find women in the UK, good British women who have changed the course of history and can be an inspiration to young girls going forward into education.
They're notoriously difficult to get hold of £5 notes as well, so you might be lucky to find one.
Absolutely.
Yes, it's a story about a snub. Who's snubbing who?
Well, we have a situation where China is potentially snubbing our Prime Minister David Cameron for meeting with the Dalai Lama. It's not 100% sure about this, but they've cancelled David Cameron's trip to Beijing for fears that he would be snubbed because he met with the Dalai Lama in a service in St Paul's Cathedral, which seeks to highlight the fact that he sees the Dalai Lama as one of the spiritual advisors for the UK.
And a story about, you said earlier on you're quite into your technology.
I
You
am
tweet,
a bit. Yes, of course I tweet.
But it's dangerous territory, tweeting.
Terribly dangerous.
Because
absolutely.
people think they can say things that they can't.
And I think that's one of the things we're seeing at the moment is this new need for ethics and morality around the Twitter sphere. We've got a story today that's come out about warnings about exposing who Jamie Bulger's killers are now, exposing their current identity on Facebook or Twitter, and the threat of a very long jail sentence if we do that.
Yeah, do you think people don't think about tweeting or other social media as treat it the same way as they do other ways of communication? Do you think somehow
this is the problem. We
separate?
talk about it as the virtual world, but actually it has actual consequences. It's a very real world, even if it's not a physical, tangible world, and it has impacts in everyday life, as we've seen with a number of trolls that have ruined people's lives.
Yeah, it goes back to the same story we were talking about earlier as well, doesn't it? That, you know, there are laws about what you can write in this country and which journalists have to follow, and, you know, there's that sort of jump from into Twitter, which perhaps people are just not aware either.
Absolutely. My anthropology background talks about, they talk about the liminality, worlds that are not quite one and not quite the other, and we're never quite sure about ethics and what we should do in those situations. So at the moment we're just trying to build up what's the framework, how does this work on the virtual world, where you can literally in a second post something, yes, and it totally changed enormous amounts of history.
Do you, so you tweet?
I do,
you?
yes.
And I think there is a tendency amongst those who tweet to just chuck stuff out there. It's a thought process and you put it straight down. Have you had to rein yourself back in the same way, or are you mindful?
I think possibly because I hang out with students so much that there is a sort of culture that you sort of filter through. This new generation coming through, I think, are more cautious than those of us who've had to come to social media fresh once we've been adults. So I think that we're going to evolve as these generations come through into being the mainstream on social media. But I have something I call my sermon outline, where I will only put something online if I would say it in a sermon.
Yes, you see, that's always a good way to think about things. Not necessarily sermons, but everybody could.
And anything you put on Twitter could be on the front page of the newspapers the following day. Whoever you are, it
literally is whoever you are, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And it is the great democratization of people, that it does mean that everybody has an equal voice, but also everyone's voice is equally responsible.
That's
on that
a good
philosophical
yes.
thought, we'll leave it. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Pleasure. Thank
you. Good to see you. Thank you. Coming up in the next half an hour, now that Britain's most successful sailor, Sir Ben Ainslie, is no longer chasing Olympic gold, he set his sights